You know, there's been so much talk about consolidation. Over the last several years, every time we speak, we talk about the possibility of consolidation, yet we actually haven't seen that take place. When do you really see consolidation in the market, and is Vodafone likely to play consolidator?
It won't happen if it doesn't get some form of facilitation from the government. The easiest way to consolidate is, of course, by making spectrum available to others. Some operators don't use it optimally or don't use it at all. So by making spectrum trading and spectrum sharing available, that would be really helpful. Actually, that was promised twice last year, and it didn't happen.
And they're still promising that the guidelines will be out very shortly.
I've heard that now several times, so let's hope that it happens this time. But the other thing is that
if we do see those guidelines, you know, being notified by the government, do you believe that that could provide the first real trigger?
It depends on the conditions. What we've seen in some of the discussion about the regulations of spectrum sharing, for example, is that both operators who share the spectrum would have to pay full spectrum usage charge. Now, that is not an incentive at all, because it simply means that you suddenly start to pay double. Now, I think all these things make it important. They should make it attractive. They should not try to, again, put financial burden on the industry, but actually try to create a situation where this spectrum is going to work for the Indian population. And so far we have not seen that. The other issue is, of course, the M&A policies, where based on a certain argumentation, which in itself might not be wrong, the government is saying you need to pay the government for spectrum if you would merge two operators who have both spectrum. But that makes the merge in itself totally unattractive, because you have to pay the guy that you buy, and then you have to pay the government also.
So again, are we going to continue to talk about consolidation in the future as well, and not really see results on the table?
Well, if you continue to talk about consolidation in the future, I won't be part of that.
You may not be part of it, but what's your assessment, Marten? Because, and do you really see Vodafone playing the role of consolidator in the Indian market?
We've always said that we are a consolidator by nature, because this is the only business we are in.
You were talking to TTSL, right?
We have been looking at various opportunities in the market. I will not comment on any one specific, but so far, due to indeed two things, that most companies have quite a high expectation if it comes to pricing, and that combined with a very often weak balance sheet makes it not easy to make a business case for that. But the other thing is, indeed, there is not much of facilitation going on from the government in terms of spectrum M&A rules. We just discussed it.
Let me ask you about the unfinished agenda, the Vodafone IPO. You, in the past, said that it was not something that was held up on account of, it was not held up because of the tax-related issues, but it was held up because investors had concerns about the uncertainty with regards to the regulatory environment. Now that you've been able to renew your license, the spectrum auctions are over and done with, do you believe that it makes a business sense to go ahead for the IPO anytime soon?
It's of course a decision of the shareholders, but we have seen one other really big change in between. When we were preparing for the auctions 3 years ago, that was before this extension issue came up, actually we could only own, as Vodafone, 74% of the company.
Yeah, now you own 100%.
Now that FDI has changed, FDI rule has changed to 100%, Vodafone now owns 100%, so that reason in itself is no longer there, which means that the shareholder now will have to look at other arguments to do it, but over and over we have said that being part of the Indian society in terms of a listed company here is probably the right thing to do over time.
6 years, 8 years, is that the horizon that you have for the IPO?
You should ask that question to my shareholders in London, because this is in the end the shareholders' decision.
But what's your own sense?
No, I can't really comment on that, because it's difficult, because it is due to also where is the market, what are the multiples, what is the market willing to pay, is there an opening for an IPO, and we would have to start the preparation from scratch again. We were well on our way 3 years ago, but of course then the process stopped.
Now let me talk to you about the tax wars, which is something that you've spent a lot of your time talking about. Where do things currently stand? We've seen so much back and forth on the possibility of conciliation. Now, of course, we're headed into arbitration. You know, one has stopped trying to track the number of tax woes or tax issues or tax run-ins that you're involved with the government with. Where do things currently stand on the tax front? And would you say that this has been the single biggest disappointment of your 6-year tenure here?
No, it is not, because I've said many times, this tax case is a case between the Vodafone Group in London and the Indian government. It has not impacted the operating company here at all. It's, for me, as I called it sometimes, a sideshow. Of course, it is happening there. It was having some effects on the company, especially in the period that we came out of the Supreme Court and then the retrospective taxation, legislation, sorry. The reality has been that there is a process in place. Everyone is happy with the process, and we now, I think, just have to walk that path. So I can't say much more about that. It is an arbitration, and let us hope that that process follows its way.
So if this is not your most disappointing moment of running Vodafone India, what has been your most disappointing moment, and what is your big regret?
There are no big regrets. The only thing, and I keep saying that, is that I think that the industry as such in India is struggling about one big issue, and that one big issue is spectrum. And if there is one big disappointment, then it is the fact that we have not been able to convince the government to take a slightly different route there by making more spectrum available, by dealing in a different way with these issues like spectrum trading, spectrum sharing, M&A rules. Let's hope that going forward that will change soon.
Okay, let me talk to you about the road ahead now, and let me start by asking you about what you estimate your market share to be, given the fact that you've now got additional spectrum, your network expansion plans, you're going from 9 circles to 16 circles as far as your 3G network is concerned. You're almost at 180 million subscribers. Where do you see this business headed? Well,
we for sure need to pass the 200 million as soon as possible, so that's a magic number for us, the 200 million customers.
By when do you hope to cross that?
Well, I hope probably somewhere a year from now if we get lucky, but I can't put a date on it. But if you see what we add every year, then it should be not too long out, maybe between 1 and 2 years. But the real issue is not so much that we got more spectrum in the circles where we didn't have it, because we are already, as you know, serving our customers there with 3G services. I think the real issue in the coming years is to transform the company from what it was, a voice-dominated company, to a data-dominated company. And the second thing is, we as Vodafone have built now also a good enterprise business. We have started M-Pesa, and we need to make a success out of these new businesses. Our voice business is our traditional bread and butter business. That is doing well, it is still growing. But actually the future will all be depending on these three things, which is data, which is enterprise services, and which in the end will also be financial services.
Marten, you know, you've always been, and I started by saying that you've been called the fearless crusader of the telecom industry. You know, you've often said that policy in India is probably not for the industry or even in the best interest of the country. As you leave India today, what is it that you would like to tell the Indian government for the sake of a better future for the Indian telecom industry?
Yeah, I think they have been looking too much short term, meaning that it's nice to fix your budget deficit, and it's necessary, I understand that, but at the same time, longer term, this industry could have done, I think, a lot more for the country, which would have driven economic growth. And actually the government probably gets in the end far more money from that than tapping it too early.
As you leave the reins now to Sunil, what is it that you would like him to focus on? What would the 3 priorities be for the new leadership team?
Well, his priority needs to be, of course, where I failed, which is please try to give my poor shareholders a return.
By when do you actually expect that return, Marten?
No, I can't give you that prediction. It's really depending on a lot of things that might happen in the market, as we just discussed. Is some consolidation going to happen? Will there be some
But you think consolidation will happen over an 8-year period? Will Vodafone have the patience?
I said it might take 8 years, but it doesn't mean that it can't happen tomorrow partly.
But how long do you think Vodafone will have the patience to stay committed to the Indian market without return on investment?
Vodafone is a real long-term investor. Our industry is not the kind of industry that gives you fast paybacks anyhow. And we also know that if you go into a country like India, which will still grow for many, many, many years, I've always said I believe it will grow for probably 3 or 4 decades easily. That means you are here for the long haul. So no matter how much I might have been kicking and screaming, the reality is we're here for the long haul, meaning that if the return comes, it might come a few years later. It doesn't mean that Vodafone would get second thoughts.
Marten Pieters, it's always been a pleasure speaking with you. We wish you the very best of luck with your future innings in Cape Town. Thanks very much for joining us on CNBC TV 18. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheree.
With that, it's a wrap on the CNBC TV 18 special from all of us here. Goodbye. Many thanks for watching.